Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about data analysis. It's something really essential for school leaders, but often new leaders can tend to overcomplicate it. So today I want to talk about different strategies that you can use to get started with data analysis as a new school leader. Starting with tip 1, manage your expectations. My bachelor's is in mathematics, and I was formerly a high school math teacher before becoming an administrator. So I'm very comfortable with numbers and data analysis, and I have seen firsthand how it can turn into a black hole. It's either a time drain or you just get caught in this deep dive spiral. And at the end, you're left with, what do I even do with this information? Or I already knew this, I didn't need to do all this data analysis to figure this out. So the intention behind this tip of managing expectations is that the more data number crunching you do doesn't necessarily equate to a really empowered or enlightened decision. I think that there's this implied narrative or expectation that data-driven decisions or data analysis has to be this extensive process and it's a full-on audit. But what I've found in my experience is that as a leader, really you just need to understand the data from a high-level perspective and be able to use that to make decisions. It's also important to still have access to all of the data details in case that needs to be referenced. Because of my math background, I would do all this type of extensive data analysis at the beginning, only to find out at the end of it that it took way too much time and the data I really needed to make an effective decision was that high level overview. So that's why I put managing expectations as the first tip, because for leaders, a deeper analysis isn't always required. The second tip I have is to define your purpose. There's 2 questions I always ask myself before I start data analysis. The first question is, what decision needs to be made from this data? So for example, are you looking for struggling students to put into a support program? Are you taking a look at test trends over time to be able to justify a new purchase that will support students? Are you analyzing the impact of school improvement goals, or even things that are staff related, like assessing the workplace culture? The second question I ask is, who's going to see this data? Is it going to be for a small team? Is it just for myself to be able to understand? Am I going to present it to all staff, or is this going out to the greater community? These 2 questions really help me gauge how in-depth the data analysis is going to be and also frames what type of data I'm going to need. And this leads me into tip 3, which is figure out your approach. Once you know your purpose, you can start to figure out your approach, and there's typically 2 different ways of doing this. The first one is to have some specific focus or question that you want the data to answer. Let's say the purpose is to support struggling students with this new intervention program. The question might be, who are the students that are receiving D's and F's in this particular subject area? Another example is, let's say your purpose is to increase enrollment in honors and AP classes. Then the question will be, who are students receiving, let's say 95% or higher in these different subject areas? Those are just one type of example. You can really take the purpose and question format and apply it to any type of data set, and it doesn't have to be just with students. It can also be examining things about staff too. As a side note, we often tend to only focus on supporting struggling populations, but I highly recommend you start incorporating into your practice, looking at celebrating populations that are doing well, and also taking a look at kind of that in the middle group where maybe there's a little bit of motivation that might be needed. And this can apply to both staff and students, so we can really support the entire community in being able to reach for their highest potential. The second option is a see what's illuminated type of approach, and this is really more of that audit, researchy, evaluation type of deep analysis. Essentially, this is where you take one or multiple data sets, you run some different analyses, and then you kind of see what does the analyses reveal. This is really where it's going to be a time trap and a deep dive spiral. The great thing about this approach is that it can illuminate things that have never been considered before or never been explored before. And on the flip side, it can also kind of share a bunch of information that you don't need to take action on, but it might just be interesting data. Because of this, I highly recommend that beginners go with option 1, the purpose and question approach, because the second see what's illuminated type of approach really requires a strong understanding of the context surrounding the data and also having a strong understanding of data analysis methods. Tip 4 is knowing what to look for. When analyzing data, sometimes it can be really confusing to know where to even start. For new leaders, here are 4 different things I recommend you look for, and this should cover most of the data analysis that you'll need for decision making. The first one is outliers, and this takes a look at what data points are significantly standing apart from the rest. The second one is patterns, and this is taking a look at recurring trends or data points within the same set of data or across multiple sets of data. I really use this more to take a look at understanding systems as a whole. Now, there might be some data sets where you're looking at them every single month or quarterly, and in this case, one of the areas I recommend you take a look at are repeaters. Are there any data points that are consistently showing up month after month? In addition to month after month looking for repeaters, you also want to take a look at any new additions that might be popping up too. The fifth tip is really understanding how can you use data to inform your decision making. In general, there's about 4 main purposes that data can be used. The first one is confirming what you already know and using the data as a justification point to key stakeholders in why you made a certain decision or where the decision is coming from. The second purpose is that it may illuminate an area that really needs attention. This could look like a student who maybe wasn't recommended by teachers needing additional support, but you're catching it on the data side. It could also illuminate a broken system that you're discovering 80% of staff really need this problem addressed. The third one is that it establishes a baseline that can measure changes throughout the year. At the beginning of the year, you just want to know what's the current context, where is everyone in relation to this data component, and quarterly or monthly, you'll start looking at the updated information, comparing it to the baseline, and determining if any progress or regression needs a different action plan. The fourth one is that you may use the data to create a historical record that you can then reference in future years. It could be something like, around this time of year, I know that staff morale is going to be low, so I really need to implement some things proactively. Or it might be, I know that around this time of year, we're going to get a lot more discipline referrals, so I need to make sure that I'm supporting staff and students in being able to navigate this time of year. It also might be that you experience something this year that feels out of the norm, and you can use that historical record to figure out what might be the root cause of whatever is causing this irregularity this present year. My final tip, and arguably the most important tip of this whole video, is you need to be really mindful around the rhetoric behind data. People love to weaponize data and present it as pure fact or logic, but there are countless factors that can affect data integrity. In a leadership position, I really believe that data should not be used to put people down or to force an agenda. It's really about using the data to find more people to help and find better ways to support people. So when it comes to communicating and talking about data, I really recommend you focus on the actual decision and actions of what you're doing as a result of the data analysis, rather than getting caught up in how you did the data analysis or justifying why you chose these numbers. It's more important to focus on the solution and the actual implementation after you make the decision, rather than getting caught up in all the numerical jargon. Remember, data is a tool to help support your leadership. It is not meant to be a replacement for your judgment or to dehumanize any decisions. So those are my tips for navigating data analysis as a new school leader. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you experienced the joy of doing something you love today.